Hello, horror fans. Welcome back to Jay vs. Horror. I'm your host, Jay Wall, and today, guys, we are talking about 10 times that wrestlers kicked ass in the horror genre. Now, to be honest, guys, there are way more than 10. Wrestlers have done a lot in the horror genre, and especially in the past 10 to 20 years because of the independent film scene growing so large. Wrestlers have been able to take a break from their normal job in the ring and hit the horror scene. Alright, horror fans, let's get started. At number 10, I have El Santo, starring in Samson vs. the Vampire Women. It's a 1962 supernatural action horror film starring the wrestling superhero El Santo, or also just known as Santo. Alright, horror fans, now, if you don't know about El Santo, the Saint, it's worth taking a trip over to Google to research because it's just far more information that I could ever give in this episode. Now, El Santo started out as a wrestler, and then in 1952 there was a comic book drawn of El Santo, and from there he went on to film roles, including superhero movies and horror films. El Santo was more than just a wrestler in Mexican culture. He is a folklore legend. In fact, many out there may say that Santo belongs at the top of this list, and I can honestly say I would have no argument with that. At number 9, I have The Undertaker as the Soul Chaser in Poltergeist: The Legacy. Now, a lot of people don't remember Poltergeist: The Legacy, but it was actually on for a long time. It started out on Showtime and then was syndicated for regular network television. We find ourselves here at Season 4, Episode 8, and one of the lead characters, Nick's deceased brother, Jimmy, suddenly reappears, and he's claiming that he's being pursued by a soul chaser who then targets the entire Poltergeist Legacy house. The soul chaser is, of course, played by The Undertaker, and basically in this episode he is playing The Undertaker. It's really fun, though, because they add all the cinematic stuff to it, and you really see The Undertaker's character take on a new life. And while Poltergeist: The Legacy wasn't the greatest horror show to ever make it onto television, it was still one I enjoyed quite a bit as a kid, especially on the weekends. At number 8, we have CM Punk. CM Punk did 2 horror movies in 2019 that are worth mentioning. The first one would be The Girl on the Third Floor, which he starred in and started all the stuff about how he looked so much like Ash that a lot of people thought he should be in an Evil Dead remake. However, to be honest, the film isn't super strong. It's okay. It's your typical supernatural horror film. I think what was interesting about it to me is that CM Punk kind of plays a jackass. He's the lead, but he's not someone you really want to hang around with. So in the other film, which is Rabid, which was done by the Saska sisters, a remake of the David Cronenberg film, he just plays one of the people who gets infected and seems to keep showing up. But it's almost a better role for him because he gets to trash some stuff, and he also kind of has the CM Punk personality in that role. And so while I can't say either one of these films is going to make everybody's top 10 from 2019, I can say that CM Punk does a solid job in both roles, and I can't wait to see more from him. At number 7, Goldberg in Santa's Sleigh. Guys, this movie is fun. Please don't take it seriously if you watch it, because if you do, you're not going to have any enjoyment at all. It is straight B-movie schlock horror, but like I said, it's a ton of fun. You have Goldberg playing Santa. He's spearing people. He's drop-kicking people. I mean, the opening scene alone is worth watching the movie for. He kills several famous people in the opening scene, including Fran Drescher and Jimmy Caan. I mean, to be completely honest, we all know that not everything in this film works. It's not supposed to, but what does work is Goldberg. I mean, seriously, guys, I waited years before watching this film after it came out just because it didn't seem appealing to me at all. But once I did watch it, it's one of my favorites to watch every Christmas now. At number 6, we have The Rock, the People's Champ, and the film is Doom. Now, this one's interesting because The Rock is the bad guy in this, right? And I never saw that coming when I watched this movie. Carl Urban is also in the film, and he plays the protagonist. However, when this film came out, I wasn't real keen on Carl Urban. He hadn't done much at that point, but of course he went on to play Judge Dredd. He's in The Boys. He He also played Dr. McCoy in the new Star Trek franchise, so Karl Urban turned into a pretty fine actor for the sci-fi genre. Doom's not the greatest movie of all time, but it is a fun sci-fi creature feature, and I recommend it, especially on a slow day where maybe you're just going back and watching movies you skipped over in the past. You could do a lot worse than Doom. At number 5, Jesse Ventura in Predator. Jesse has several great lines in this film as Blaine, a commando who fights, of course, with the mini Gatling gun. I don't know how well Blaine would play with today's audiences, especially with the cancel culture and all that stuff. I don't think they would appreciate a lot of his thoughts and words. However, he fits perfectly into this scenario. We have Arnold Schwarzenegger, of course, as Dutch, Carl Weathers as Dylan, Bill Duke as Mac, and Sonny Landham, of course, as Billy, the tracker. And he fits right in with this bunch. Just a great bunch of muscled up meatheads. I always kind of looked at Predator like a slasher, guys. But instead of buxom blondes running through the woods, we have all these muscled up guys running through the jungle, right? And it actually makes Arnold one of my favorite final girls. But a great performance here from Jesse Ventura, who we all know went on to do politics. He's also done some great stuff in the wrestling world besides wrestling, taking a stand against management and looking out for the guys in the locker room. But I don't think anyone will ever forget his performance as Blaine in Predator. At number 4, we have Tyler Mane from Rob Zombie's Halloween. And some people don't know this, but Tyler Mane was a wrestler. He actually made it all the way to the WCW in the early 90s before he decided to strike out and do some acting. And he's done pretty well for himself. He was in a movie last year even called Penance Lane that was directed by a great friend of ours named Michael Levy. Booker T and Diamond Dallas Page are also in Penance Lane, so if you're a wrestling fan, check that movie out. A lot of people hate the Rob Zombie Halloween movies. I don't personally hate them. There's different parts of each one that I like more than the rest of the film. But I will say this, Tyler Mane's performance as Michael Myers is on point. He is definitely menacing. He has the size and the physicality, and in my opinion, he's one of the best to ever play Michael Myers. He also played Sabretooth in the original X-Men movie and does a great performance there. Sometimes people forget how physical acting can be so great. They get caught up in dialogue and monologues and performances and stuff like that without ever thinking about the fact that physicality is a very significant element in performance, especially in horror films. And like I said, for me, Tyler Mane is one of the best. At number 3, John Huber in Mohawk. Now, for any of you who don't know who John Huber is, he is an American wrestler who recently passed away. He wrestled under the name of Luke Harper in the WWE before switching to AEW in 2020 and wrestling under the name Brody Lee. John just passed away recently, very shocking and very heartbreaking. Mohawk is a film about American culture. It's about the War of 1812, and here we have British soldiers that are trying to talk American Indians into fighting against the colonists, or Americans at this point, I guess you would say. It's a historical, survivalist horror film that's also kind of a revenge horror film. In the film, John Huber plays an American soldier who is a hulking menace. This guy is a serious problem, and in the film, the Americans get revenge on the Native Americans, and the Native Americans come back and get revenge on the Americans. It goes back and forth until it becomes a battle of wills to survive. John Huber does a great job in this film, and it was a great performance for him, even though it was his last. At number 2, Kane in See No Evil. Now, Kane, also known as Glenn Jacobs, it's very hard to see this guy not in a horror film, right? He has the look, he has the size, he is intimidating, and he is scary as hell. Now, it would be very easy for the character of Jacob Goodnight to get kind of lost in the shuffle. I mean, some people will even say that Jacob Goodnight is basically a ripped-off version of Jason Voorhees. But I think they did a great thing here in giving him his own backstory and really fleshing out why he is the supernatural psycho killer that he is. And I think what's really strange about See No Evil is they did a sequel to this They're both done by WWE Films. The second one, they actually got the Saska sisters to direct. They got Danielle Harris to be in it, Catherine Isabel, and they brought Jacob Goodnight back in a way where he looked a little bit different, almost like they were trying to do a Friday the 13th type thing here, where they changed the mask and changed the look of the character a little bit. But somehow they missed the mark, and the second movie just doesn't live up to the first one. It was kind of one of those deals where they had all the right ingredients, but they just didn't cook it right. That being said, though, great performance here from Glenn Jacobs as Jacob Goodnight in See No Evil. Alright, horror fans, now we've made it down to my number one pick, and there can only be one person for this slot. I mean, it's so obvious that it's almost silly. Roddy Piper in They Live. They Live is, of course, a 1988 American science fiction action horror film written and directed by John Carpenter, and it is based on the 1963 short story 8 O'Clock in the Morning by Ray Nelson. Now, in the film, we have Roddy Piper playing a regular Joe named John Nada, who just kind of stumbles across an alien conspiracy. Great supporting performance here from Keith David as Frank Armitage, but in my opinion, the rowdy one steals the show here. He kicks ass and chews bubblegum, of course, famously. An interesting thing here to me, guys, is that Roddy Piper was actually a decent actor, especially for action films. And there would be other action films that starred Arnold Schwarzenegger or Jean-Claude Van Damme, and the character that they played would be John Smith or Joe Thomas or something weird like that. You know, they have this crazy accent, and they're also playing an American-based character. And I always thought, man, when I would see a role like that, that would be perfect for the rowdy one. Now, Roddy wasn't as muscled up as some of the other wrestlers of his era, but I think that's deceiving, because there's a lot of guys you see who can go hit the gym 3 hours a day and they come out with these huge biceps and triceps and things like that. And then you have guys like the rowdy one, who's just a big, thick, muscular machine. And personally, I can tell you I would 10 times rather fight one of those muscled up guys than someone like Roddy Piper. There's a little story I've heard a few times, a few different ways in the wrestling world, and it's that during his WCW days, I mean, Piper was in his 50s during this period, and he had an altercation with the huge Kevin Nash, who was, of course, probably just in his mid-30s at this point, and Kevin Nash is like 7'1", huge guy, 350 pounds, something like that, all muscle. Apparently, he and Piper had words over one of the promos that was going to lead up to a big tag team match between Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, and Ric Flair and Roddy Piper. It was kind of the new generation versus the old generation, right? Well, apparently Piper got a little personal with some of his promos, as he was very well known to do. Kevin Nash didn't take it too kindly and open-handed slapped Roddy Piper in the locker room. Now, this was a big mistake for the big guy. Rowdy instantly took his legs out from underneath him, had him on the ground, and worked him over. And they said that Ric Flair was standing in the corner laughing his butt off while people were trying to pull him apart. So a great story, and I've heard that story told different ways. Kevin Nash admits to it, but he says Piper never took him down. He just feels bad about hitting Piper. I've heard that that's bullshit, and Kevin Nash lies about everything, so who knows. But yeah, Roddy Piper, man, he's going to be missed. You know, we lost him a few years ago, and just a great personality, a great wrestler. If you ever get a chance, go watch Legends House. They have that on the WWE Network, and it's a whole series devoted to these old legends who live in a house together for a short period of time, and they kind of film them and document, you know, what they go through, these different things they set up for them. And it's very interesting here because you get to see the real Roddy Piper. He was a very tortured soul, and he had a lot of regrets in his life, but ultimately he was a pretty good guy. I think the relationship he shows here in that show with some of the guys who weren't famous, like Howard Finkel and, you know, Pat Patterson, who there's been a lot said about Pat Patterson. His relationship with those guys really shines through. He's a true friend. And guys, honestly, in my opinion, he will always be one of my favorite wrestlers to ever act. I mean, Hulk Hogan did a little bit here and there. Of course, The Rock has been very successful. John Cena continues to be more successful. Of course, we have Batista, and Batista is about to be in an upcoming film called Army of the Dead, and that's part of the reason why we decided to do this little countdown today, was to get prepared for that. But yeah, all in all, Roddy Roddy Piper. He's number one in my heart, guys. Alright, horror fans, that's all we've got for this episode. Now, we want to thank everybody for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and check us out on Patreon. For as little as $2 a month, guys, you can help keep our little horror channel going, and we will put you on our once-a-month show, our Patreon special show, where we let our patrons pick any horror film they want reviewed or any horror topic they want discussed. And as always, we will talk to you guys the next time we've got something worth talking about. Bye.